Hello and welcome, friends, to another episode of the Handyman Success Podcast, where our mission is to teach you, the listener, and inspire you to either take your handyman home improvement business to the next level. Maybe you're thinking about getting started. Overall, our mission is to teach and inspire through really the stories and experience of our guests. So my name is Jason Call, owner of Handyman Marketing Pros. With me is my co-host, Alan Lee, owner of Honestly Handyman Services in Sacramento, and the Handyman Journey coaching group. Today we are joined by Malcolm with Style Revamp. He is we're actually pretty close to our neck of the woods in the Sacramento region. So Malcolm, thank you so much for coming on, man. If you don't mind, just kind of giving us a little background about yourself and what you've got going on there.
Okay. How far do you want me to go back?
We'll leave that up to your discretion.
Right. Just after you started seeing light.
Okay, so let me just give you a quick overview about how I got to where I am now. So I actually spent probably 25 years in high tech down in the Bay Area, doing everything from selling consulting services to large networking systems, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And all along that time, I'd always been buying homes. I shouldn't say always been buying homes, but all the homes that I bought for myself, my own occupancy, were fixer-uppers. I always bought something that was kind of the dog of the neighborhood and then worked on fixing it up. So I actually, over a period of time, organically started developing skills in just general, woodworking, and household maintenance, painting, drywall, all the various things that we do when we're renovating a home. And then, and I'll never forget the date, December 10th, 2008. This is when the economy was sort of going haywire. I got a phone call from my employer, who was at that time American Power Conversion, and I was in their big data center group selling big UPSs to data centers, basically saying that my services were no longer required.
Wow.
And of course, that happened at probably the worst possible time, 15 days before Christmas, and at a time when the economy was really turning south in a hurry. And try as I might, for a good long while, I tried to get back into high tech. And it was just a combination of things. I was on the upper end of the age bracket, and they just don't want to hire older guys. So that was difficult. And I was, at that time, living in Rockland. We decided to leave the Bay Area. We came to Rockland. And I was, got to know a lot of the people in the neighborhood. And they all knew that I had tons of tools in my garage. So they knew that I knew something. And one of my good friends who lived down the street came to me one day. He goes, my wife bought this thing from Pottery Barn that she wants me to get on the wall today. And I have no clue how to do it. Can you come help me? And I said, well, sure. So I gathered up a few tools, went over to his house. 30 minutes later, the thing was hanging on the wall perfectly. And he looked at me and he said to me, he goes, Malcolm, you have skills that people would pay for. Mm-hmm. Like right then and there, that the light bulb clicked on. And I said, maybe since I can't get back into high tech again, maybe what I should do is think about just reinventing myself and doing something entirely different. And so it was at that moment, the Style and Revamp was born right then and there.
Wow.
That was roughly 8 years ago, if I remember correctly. That's how I got started.
Sweet. I didn't know that history. Thanks for sharing that.
No worries. I do that because, it's not uncommon, especially in this world today where, you're in one career, and for circumstances that may be entirely out of your control, that just goes away. And the last thing you need to do is just sit around and mope about it. You got to do something else. And so think about how you can reinvent yourself to be of value to your community. And that's kind of what I did, So that's how the journey began in what I'm doing now.
Awesome. I know a lot of folks have experienced that with COVID layoffs. I know there's been a lot of handyman home improvement businesses that have started since March 2020. So awesome. So Malcolm, it's you and your wife, Lori. if you could kind of give us a little lay of the land as far as, the focus that you guys have, like the types of jobs you do, like what you guys do in the business. And if you also don't mind sharing, like some revenue numbers, maybe like last year and any goals for this year, or really anything on that subject too. But overall, just to kind of frame your guys' business and where you're at on paper for our listeners.
Okay, excuse me. Can I go back to the beginning when I first got started? Because where I started,
that's great.
Where I am now at all.
We're not going to stop you, man.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Huh? Let's hear it.
So when I first got started, when I decided to become, quote, a handyman, I really had absolutely no idea how to do it. So I had always been hearing all these ads on radio and TV for Home Advisor. So I said, what the heck? Let me call them up and see what that's all about. So I actually got involved with Home Advisor, and I started getting their pathetic leads. And by the way, any of you who are out there, I would highly recommend stay away from them. It's not at least my experience was not good at all. But what did happen was I started getting some jobs. And I started off at a very low rate, hourly rate. I think I started at $40 an hour. It wasn't too much longer after that I realized $40 an hour is a little on the thin side. So we need to start raising it up. So I started raising my rates a little bit, and that was doing a little bit better. And then all of a sudden I started getting calls from Yelp, people who had found me on Yelp. Mm-hmm. And I'll be the first one to admit, back then we really knew nothing about social media and marketing as relates to all these other companies. We knew nothing about that. But what I did find was, when it was interesting, is that I got some 5-star reviews out on Yelp organically. I had no idea they were even out there, but people were kind enough to go out and do that. And I started to find that that I started getting a lot of additional business from that. And it just slowly but surely started to grow. And I found that the Yelp leads by far and away were way better. I found that the Home Advisor leads were terrible. And the one that finally did it for me, that caused me to just tell Home Advisor, please go away, was I got a lead, and they always tell you as soon as you get it, it comes to you in a text message form. I got the text message. I looked at it. I immediately called the client, got the client on the phone. So maybe 3 minutes had gone by. And I told her who I was and why I was calling. She said, "Oh, I've already had the work done. It's already been completed." And so I said, "Well, wait a minute, that's impossible. I just got this lead from Yelp." So I called Yelp back and I said, "Hey," and
Home Advisor,
what was happening? They go, "Well, it's too bad, just the way it works." I said, "Okay, well, here's
Home Advisor, right?
Well, goodbye." So anyway, the bottom line was that slowly but surely we started to build up our online presence began to grow. And again, it was all organically. We really weren't pushing it. But then my wife started doing this is where she really kicks into play. She was handling all the back end, but she also started doing a lot of social media marketing, Instagram posts, Facebook posts, pictures of what we were doing. And it just started growing from there very, very, very quickly. And about 4 or 5 years into the plan, I mean, a lot of the projects I was doing were, let's be very honest, they were outside the scope of what the CSLB allows, the California State Licensing Board. Their rule is that any project you do as an unlicensed handyman cannot exceed $500 labor and materials. So I started to get kind of nervous about that because people were asking me to do bigger and bigger projects, and I just didn't want to get in trouble. So at that point in time, I decided to, since a lot of the stuff I was being called into were various kinds of woodworking projects, trim carpentry projects, I went out and I got my license from the state of California. And so now I have a C6 license, which is a cabinetry, millwork carpentry, and trim carpentry license. And that gives me the opportunity to do the kind of stuff that we're doing. So what has happened is that in that period of time, our business has really veered into that lane. And what we're finding is that there's just not a lot of people out there doing it. Mm-hmm. And some of the jobs can be enormously profitable. We just finished a project And let me back up one second further. And one of the other things that we did that's maybe a little bit different than a lot of the other companies that do what you would call classic trim carpentry is that we took the time to really learn how to become really good painters, how to finish stuff to make it look fabulous. And it took some time to do that. But I spent a lot of time researching materials, researching techniques, and just struggling trying to figure out how to do this stuff and do it extremely well. So, and as a result of that, we now can, for example, if we do a kitchen, we can put a finish on those kitchen cabinets that literally looks like it just came out of the factory. It's that good. It's that good.
And just to clarify, too, for our listeners, Malcolm Style Revamp, they've really niched into this kind of like custom, beautiful kitchen cabinetry. And I know you guys do like the borders around mirrors, but some more like trim carpentry, like that's their bread and butter that they've transitioned into. So just wanted to clarify that really quick.
Yeah, so we do very little of what you would call classic handyman stuff anymore. The only time we really do it now would be in conjunction with some of the larger projects we're doing. But going back to what I was saying before, so we had a project up in Catavedera, which is for those of you who are not familiar with our area, it's a very exclusive area of the Placer County, where we put up 2,000 lineal feet of shiplap.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot. And that job that job grossed, and we also finished it, and that was a $28,000 project, and that was a good project.
How long did that take you?
1 week.
1 week. How many guys did you have working on that?
I take that back. It was 1 week. It was 5 days of installation, and it was the other guy. Their painters came in afterwards, and it took them 5 days. So all told, it was 1 week for 4 guys, but it was spread out over a 2-week period.
Right.
So 2 guys were on the carpentry crew, and then 2 guys came in on the paint crew and did all the paint work.
Okay.
So it was, but the material cost was pretty pricey too, though. Those materials are not cheap. But those can be very, very lucrative projects, Now, where I can sometimes lose money, I shouldn't say lose money, but not make very much, would be on some of the kitchen jobs that we do. Those can be very, very tricky, mainly because there are just a huge number of details that you have to make sure you account for. And if any one of those goes south, you can find yourself in a hole that you have to dig out of. So kitchen jobs can be good, but they can also be tough. And what we do, what makes us a little bit different on our kitchen jobs is we're not just like a typical painting company that would come in and take down your cabinet doors and repaint them and put them back up there. That's not what we do. We literally refresh the entire space. So we'll take off all the cabinet doors, all the drawer fronts, all those go away. We order all brand new ones of a different style. Usually the popular style right now is the shaker style. And we'll go ahead and we'll paint those, we'll remount them. But then the other thing that we do is we do a lot of where we modify the cabinet structure. For example, on the project we're on right now, the client wanted all their cabinets taken to the ceiling. So we will build what we call box extensions, which will then go up on top of the existing cabinets, take it up to the ceiling. We'll crown that off. We have all new doors and stuff made for that. Sometimes we'll take the actual, we'll actually take out maybe the cooktop section of the cabinet run, rip that out entirely so they can slip in a brand new freestanding range and oven unit. Then build a new vent enclosure, like a shiplap enclosure, etc., taken up to the ceiling. So we do a lot of really what I call, custom work that is not typical of most of the guys that are out there. And quite frankly, that's an area where you can make money. You can also lose money doing that if you're not careful. But it's also a huge differentiator between you and somebody else that's out there, because very few people are doing it. In fact, I don't know anybody else that's doing it.
So when did you specifically make this transition to doing like just strictly carpentry stuff and kitchen stuff? Like, and what are the specific like gross revenue numbers look like? Like maybe, a few years ago when you were doing just handyman stuff, what was your gross revenue as compared to where it is now? I would say, when I first got started way back when,
I would say the first year I did it, I don't even think I cleared 50 grand that first year.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it wasn't even, I don't think it was close. Now, if, on a good month, if things are going accordingly, we can gross anywhere from 40 to even 50,000 a month. That's close. Now, believe me, there's a lot of costs associated. I don't for a second think that I'm walking away with tons of cash in my pocket. I'm not. I wish I could say I was, but I'm not, man. It's like, I sometimes feel like I have a shop vac hooked up to my wallet, just sucking all the money out of it.
Yeah.
But we're grossing a lot. I'm not making as much on that gross as I would like. So right now my focus is on really fine-tuning business processes, fine-tuning operational processes, what we're doing in the field, to just make sure that things go smoother, faster, cleaner. And that's everything from, just trying to figure out the most efficient way of doing something, and then making certain that we have the right equipment and tools that can allow us to get it done in a hurry. So I've invested a lot in equipment and machinery to help the processes go faster,
So if you wouldn't mind sharing, maybe if this is too much of a personal question, I understand, but out of that gross, like 40, 50K a month, what are you bringing in like profit? Like after you're paying all your guys, after you're paying materials, do you have kind of a rough number on that?
Yeah. On if I do a 50 grand, in a month, and it depends upon the project that I'm doing. That's where it gets hard to, I can't give you an exact number, but it depends upon the project. For example, on that shiplap job I was telling you about, that was actually very profitable. I just finished another shiplap job where we also, built a custom hearth and a custom mantle in another house, and that was $6,000 for that job, and that took me just a couple of days to do it. Those jobs I do really well. The kitchen job I'm on right now is a money pit. That was sucking me dry. But it's also because we ended up doing a lot of other things beyond just the kitchen itself. We ended up rebuilding the entire staircase on the entryway into the house. We built all new box newel posts and just a number of other things, repainted everything. We're putting in iron balusters in the railing. It took away all the spindles. But that job is really, that one is actually costing me money. So at the end of the day, if I can, if I'm running at about $10,000 in my pocket, I'm doing good, I think. Doesn't always work out that way, but that's on a good month.
Right.
So on as far as like your goals and like working on business processes and kind of, from my understanding, just kind of improving profitability with your current overhead, what do you have like something that you're shooting for, or just like really anything above that 10 you're like, all right, cool. Is there a specific goal that you have profitability?
What I want to do is, yes, there is. I want to get it up to where I'm roughly profitable about 20 grand a month, and I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do that yet. It's one thing to put a number down on a piece of paper. It's another thing to be able to get there.
Yeah. It starts with putting it on the paper, though.
Yeah, it does. It does.
It's officially begun.
That's all right. So right now, the big thing I'm working on now is one of the areas where I know that that I have a challenge. And anytime you're doing the work, what I call custom work, it's really hard to estimate those accurately. And that's probably the most difficult thing. So, but I'm focused on, for example, if I'm doing a built-in project, like I'm doing one right now for a client out in Folsom, where I'm doing on both sides of a fireplace, I'm doing some very contemporary built-in cabinets with floating shelves above them. And what I've done is I've really focused on taking the time to understand how long does it take to build a particular cabinet box, okay? So when I say cabinet box, typically if you look at your kitchen cabinets, they come in specified sizes usually, and they will be anywhere from, 24 to 36 inches wide, by a specified height. They're usually 31 and a half inches high. And when you put your toe kick in, it takes you up to 35 and a half. So looking at that and understanding the cost of doing that, both from a material standpoint, from a labor of fabricating it standpoint of view, and then labor and materials to actually put a finish on it, and then installation, breaking down all those costs so I can have a very clear understanding of how much it's costing me to do this, so that when I do put together an estimate, I have some fairly accurate numbers. In other words, what I'm trying to do is break down the custom part into a series of smaller modular components, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
okay.
And also just so you just keep going on, because one of our questions is how you're estimating jobs. So if you don't mind just giving us the full scoop on how you're estimating these kind of custom jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, with kitchen cabinets, I know I've actually got that down fairly well in terms of I know what it costs me to buy my my finished doors and drawer fronts, etc. And then they charge me by the square foot. So when I go in and estimate a job, I just go in and literally measure the lineal footage, both width and height and depth, and then I calculate a square footage that I can then use for my cost. So for example, doors and drawer fronts, if I'm doing a paint grade material, it costs me $8.97 a square foot. So if I've got 63 square feet, I know that's about what my cost is going to be. Right. So then I take that price and I add to it what I know is going to be the labor to do it. And then I take that number and double it when I have everything finished. So I try to take all my costs, both labor and materials, and that includes also the amount of overhead. So the other part of factoring in on an estimate is I take my monthly fixed cost of overhead. I'm not saying this is the best way to do this the way I'm doing it, but I take my monthly fixed cost for overhead and I basically divide it by the number of work days in a month. And then for every day I think I'm going to be on a project, let's say like this built-in is going to take 2 weeks to finish, start to finish. I add 1 day, I add 2 weeks of overhead to that project. So that project is covering 2 weeks of my overhead. And then I also add in some profit, because the business has to make a profit too, besides me. Okay. And so that gets added in as well. And then that's how I come up with my final price.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Awesome.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So what are what is, I guess, some of your biggest challenges when it comes to estimating? Is it just the variance of the different jobs and spaces?
Yeah, that is absolutely the biggest challenge. And and again, this kind of falls back into getting into your lane and staying in your lane. So I'm also looking at some of the projects that we're doing, and I'm saying, okay, we're not going to do one like that anymore, at least not for a while. Okay. And I've kind of gone back again. It's taken a few steps backwards to say, okay, I'm going to focus on this set of core kinds of projects, do only those, and get really good at those and really profitable at those. And then as we kind of have all of our systems and processes worked out for those, then work our way slowly into expanding our offering into different areas of custom work. Because almost everything we do is custom. Although I'm trying as hard as I can to take custom and break it down into an aggregate of smaller kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? More predictable jobs. By the way, your video has gone haywire on me.
I know. It's ours as well. We're working on that, some technical difficulties, but we can continue talking nonetheless. So in your business, can you tell me a little bit about, do you have employees? Do you have 1099 contractors? What does that kind of labor force look like?
1099 contractors. 1099 contractors. And by the way, I'm glad you brought that up because that's one of the things I wanted to talk about. Okay. When I say that I have challenges on projects, it's with manpower. That's the number one.
Right. So that you would say that's your number one issue, yes. Kind of. Yeah, okay, manpower.
Without a doubt. Not only are they expensive, because these guys, the lowest paid guy that I will bring in is at 25. The highest paid guy is at 35 or $40 an hour. Mm-hmm. So if you just for blink and slightly underestimate the amount of time that those guys are going to take to complete a particular task, you're going to lose money on that.
Definitely
in a hurry, and I mean in a big hurry. So in my opinion, that's the one thing that it just is funny. I just in the last 3 weeks or so, I've been reflecting on all of this, going back and looking at old numbers In fact, my wife brought this up. She goes, we made more money a year ago than we are now. And I realized there was one major difference, and that was one guy that I brought in that cost me a lot of money. He's very good at what he does, don't get me wrong, but he's also a lot slower than I anticipated him to be. Mm-hmm. So the time it takes him to complete a job sometimes will exceed what I anticipated that it would. And as a consequence, that's where I can lose some money right there. So those are some of the challenges. So if I were to roll it backwards, and these are 1099 guys, I think I would start going back and picking up some more like apprentice type guys that I could bring in and slowly train in our sweet spot, in our lane, and get them up to speed so that they and my goal is to get to a point where I'm not the main carpenter on the job. I'm in the background filling in if necessary, but I'm more in the role of driving the business. That's what I want to do. That's where I'm trying to get.
That's cool. So
not there yet.
So as far as your 1099s go, do you mind sharing kind of like how that pricing structure goes? Because I know that we have guys that kind of question, should I go W-2? Should I go 1099? And then like also, what do you pay at 1099 and how do you do that? Do you do like percentage of the job, or what does that look like for you guys?
I'm not sure I understand the question, Alan.
So like when you hire someone to be a 1099 contractor, do you give them like say 20% of the labor, or do you give them a flat hourly rate? How do you pay them?
I give them a flat hourly rate.
Okay.
Although one of the changes that I am making is that, and these are with my finish guys, the guys that come in and do all my finish work. What I'm starting to do is I'm sharing with them prior to starting the project. This is the project we're going to do. Give me a quote for your end of it. You're going to finish it. How much you want to charge me to do that. And part of the reason why I'm doing that is because I'm trying to eliminate I'm trying to eliminate having to go back and pay for mistakes that they may have made, if that makes sense. In other words, if they're kind of working for me on an hourly rate and they screw something up, then I have to cover the cost of them fixing that. What I wanted to do was, at least for a period of time until we have everything really worked out and running fairly smooth, is to have them quote the project to me. Then if they say, okay, we're going to paint all the kitchen cabinets and we're going to charge you $6,000 to do that, I say, great. I'll specify the materials they have to use. I'll specify the processes that they have to use. In other words, 2 coats of primer, 2 coats of finish coat. We're going to use a catalyzed polyurethane paint on the surfaces, so we have a really hard, durable, beautiful finish when it's done. And they're going to then base their price on using all that stuff and following those set of rules when we do it. That way I can kind of like, what I'm trying to do is, if I eliminate all the hassles and the worries about what can go wrong in the finishing job, then I can turn around and refocus my efforts on what we're doing and getting everything worked out to the point of getting to the finishing job. In other words, all the carpentry, all the preparation work, sourcing the materials, it goes on and on and on.
Yeah, that makes more sense. And then at that point, it kind of becomes like an expense, just like materials are. It's like, okay, what are you going to charge me to do these cabinets? And then you just factor that into your pricing.
That's exactly right.
That's it. Maybe put a little markup on it if you want, or whatever it's going to take.
Absolutely, put a markup on it. Nothing is free.
That's cool.
At the end of the day, I'm still responsible for the job. So, I there has to be a profit in there for me to even, otherwise you could just say to the client, well, I'm not going to do that. You can go find something else.
Hire this guy to do it. Yeah.
Exactly.
So I think that's a good topic, and that kind of brings up another thing. It's kind of a debate or a conversation that's been happening for years, but do you mark up your materials, and if so, how much?
Yes,
what does that
do.
look like? Yeah,
it's somewhat, I wish I don't really have a standard number. Sometimes it's somewhat dependent upon the client, the location, et cetera. But I try to be somewhere around 50%. So if I'm paying $100 for a piece of casing, I'm going to charge them $150 for it.
Right. Yeah, that's a good that's a good formula to use. We used to use kind of a matrix where it's like, depending on the price of the item, we would mark it up more or mark it up less, depending this or that. But now we kind of just multiply everything by 60%. We kind of just do a flat 60% markup on everything, and it tends to work out well. for both us and the client. It's makes it easy peasy, just 60% and good to go. So
I agree. I couldn't agree more. In fact, I've been thinking about even taking it up a little bit higher, but right now I'm running it at 50%. But that also brings up something I kind of briefly blew by that when I said it depends sort of upon the project and the client where they're located. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I've actually learned very quickly is that you can't do not everybody. This is not meant to sound arrogant in any way, but let's face it, not everybody is going to be able to afford your projects. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So if I get a call, for example, from someone in, let's say, North Highlands, as an example, I know that they're not going to be able to afford what it is that we do. Mm-hmm. And so, I try to, weed them out fairly quickly, not in a mean way, but just, basically let them know roughly what the price is going to be so that they can decide to move on. Which brings me to another thing too, and that is that in this custom world that we have, you can spend an enormous amount of time just running around looking at jobs that you might never get. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I've done is I really have put a focus on making sure that before I set foot into a client's office or home, I know that they are prepared, that they know about what this is going to cost within plus or minus a certain range, and that they're prepared to spend that kind of money. Yeah. Otherwise, you're just going to waste your time. And this is something beautiful. I tell other guys who say, look, know if they can afford it before you even bother going out there, Mm-hmm. So if I get a response from email, for example, I'll take a look at what they have. We always ask for a description of what they want to do. And by the way, Jason, this, we have it set up on our website so that they can click on request an online estimate. They give us the details of what they want to do. It comes into our email system, and I'll always send it back saying, hey, send me inspiration photos of what you're looking for. Yeah. In other words, this is what you have, but show me what you want. And I can take a look at that, and I can guess and get fairly, not exactly on the number, but within a range of, let's say plus or minus 20%, either up or down. I can give them a rough idea about what that's going to cost. And they'll say, hey, that's in our budget. Come on out. Let's do it. Or they'll say, no, that's a little bit more than we wanted to spend. Thank you very much. And I'd say, okay, that's great. I just saved myself a trip,
Right. Yeah, you can weed people out right from the get. That's one thing that we've really implemented this year is just being straight up with someone, being like, okay, you could do it on small stuff, right? Oh, you need a kitchen faucet and, a garbage disposal. You're probably looking at, at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, materials, everything like that, you might be looking at $500 depending on what we're getting, this and that. And if that number sounds outrageous to them, then obviously they need to go somewhere else, and that's fine. They're just not the client for us, And
that's exactly right.
And the price may change,
So what we have found is that our sweet spot from a geographical standpoint of view in our area is Placer County. That's where the money is.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
El Dorado Hills, and then if you want to consider Sac County, it would be probably most likely Folsom in that area there. And so we do that's pretty much where we that's our sort of sphere of operation, and so I think that's especially if you're starting out, trying to understand who your clients are and who your clients are not, and understanding that very, very quickly. By the way, can you see, is my video working to you?
No, you're working great. Yeah, we're just having some technical difficulties on our end, but conversation works nonetheless. So
good thing it's a podcast.
Good thing.
Okay.
Yeah, that actually, there was a post the other day in our Facebook group that asked basically like, hey, what do you guys think about going after like property management companies? And to me, it was like the wrong question. Like the first question is like, what kind of customer are you trying to serve?
Right.
And so narrowing that down first, and then if they fall into that bucket, then yeah, you should definitely investigate that. But so it's a great thing that every business owner needs to look at, and that most they probably don't, or they take a long time to realize like, oh, I need to just be serving my ideal client, or else I'm going to be wasting a lot of time and killing my profitability. And I imagine that's underscored in the custom work that you do, Malcolm.
I would, I will tell you this, I did work for a number of property management companies back when I was doing more what I would call the general handyman work. And I will tell you that after a period of time, I said, you know what, they're not really interested in paying for value. They're interested in paying just to get the damn thing done. And so that it looks marginally good and that their tenants won't complain. And that just wasn't me. That's not the kind of work that I like to do. So I started to steer away from them. And not to mention the fact that they tend to be pretty cheap. They don't want to spend a lot of money, So I found that working for property management companies was just not something I really wanted to do long term.
Yep.
And so on that note, what, if you don't mind kind of talking about your transition from going from, largely handyman into the custom work, could you kind of flesh that out? Because I know a lot of our listeners, like they have their desired niche that they're looking to go into. I know there's a lot of people that want to do carpentry. If you don't mind kind of fleshing that out and like how you made that jump and just what that transition looked like for you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I started to get just a couple of requests. Well, let me back up. So my brother owns a very large commercial millwork and cabinetry shop down in South Sacramento. He employs probably 50 guys, and they do largely commercial cabinetry, like reception desks. You go into hospitals, you see the big reception desks and all the fancy countertops and everything. That's what they do. And I've worked with him on and off over the years, and he's actually has worked for me too. He's one of the 1099 guys that I bring in from time to time. But anyway, so I started getting some requests from clients where I was out just doing general handyman work, saying, we're thinking we'd like to have this built in this area right here. Do you know anybody that can do that? Is that something that you can do? And I said, well, no, I can't really build it. I know somebody who can. I can install it for you if we get it built. So that's kind of that's one of the ways it got started. Was I started just getting random requests for things that were just a little bit outside of what you would call the traditional handyman work. And when that got posted out on Yelp from some of the people that I was doing work for, it just kind of grew. For example, I did a project in Folsom for a client that had just come here from the Bay Area, and they had in their master bedroom, they wanted to do this grid work of wall trim that was kind of done in a panel, sort of a panel look. It's on my website. And I did that, and they were absolutely thrilled with how it turned out. And it really did turn out fabulous. Unbeknownst to me, she took pictures of it and posted it to Yelp with a 5-star review. And I started getting calls off of that.
That's awesome.
I didn't even know she did it. They just did it. So, you start, so just little by little. So somebody will call you up then when they see that, and they'll say, well, I have something that's a little bit different, but this is kind of what I'm thinking I want to do. Is that something you can do? And we would say, I would say, yeah, I can give that. I'll give that a shot. And so we just started slowly but surely getting these requests in around the handyman work that were more what I would call carpentry related. In fact, they were very much more carpentry related.
Right.
And I was starting to make a little bit more money when I was doing those. But the one that finally tipped the scale was a woman from our church, Alan, from Bayside, had a kitchen that she wanted to redo. And I had been in there doing some fancy carpentry work around for some mirror trim and some other stuff, which is also one of the ones on my website. And she really, for whatever reason, she just really liked me personally. She and her husband did. So she had this job where she wanted to refresh their entire kitchen. And she asked me if I'd be willing to do it. And I, my first reaction was, no, I'm not doing that. It's way outside of what I'm comfortable doing. And then, the more I thought about it, I thought, if you don't stretch, you're never going to grow. Right.
Yep.
So I finally said, okay, I'll do it. So and that involved, refitting all the kitchen cabinets with pull-out drawers, down in the storage areas, pull out drawers for pots and pans, and all new doors and drawer fronts. And so I said, okay, I'll do it. And I'll never forget when I was doing the painting work, I was doing it at my house. And I literally went into my whole downstairs of my house, and I laid out 2x4s over all the floor, and I painted all these cabinets, and I took our doors and door fronts, and I had my boys and my wife. I would paint them, and they would run in them, set them down on these 2x4s in the living room, in the dining room, and in the family room, so it could dry. It was just it was a freaking nightmare to do it, but it turned out really, really good. Mm-hmm. And I posted that on our website. And sure enough, boom, I got another call from someone else. And it was from a referral from a real estate agent that had just sold a house to a woman who was coming from Citrus Heights into Lincoln, and she wanted to redo her kitchen. So I got that job. Boom, that got posted on the website. And then shortly after that, I got a call from one of our good friends that live here in the neighborhood. They wanted me to do the same thing. But this one was a much, much more substantial job. And I did this one and by the way, all along this time, I was in the process of getting my license so I could do this stuff legally. Mm-hmm. But it just sort of grew from there. So now we've done, I'm not even sure how many we've got. I think I got 5 kitchens. I haven't even posted them yet on the website. We haven't even done that yet. And a bunch of other really cool commercial woodworking projects that we've done as well. So that's the other thing. So, when you mentioned custom woodworking, that pulls in a lot of traffic. The built-ins and the floating shelves and the mantles and all these kinds of things, they're just a big draw right now,
Yeah, and I think by and large that custom woodworking, right? Like to me, that screams more high-end client than like you would just organically get more clients from like Catavadera than North Highlands, right? Because that's just the way it works, right? So interesting.
One other kind of side note to this too, Malcolm, if you don't mind, you kind of explain the transition, how you are now focusing on that. That's the work that you guys do. For anyone that's looking to get into that, like what kind of pitfalls or like any kind of like tools or something that they need to be thinking about to make that transition for real?
Yeah.
Not just kind of like every single week, you got cabinets like drying out in your living room.
Yeah. Well, what we've done is we have refocused our efforts so that we basically turn our client's site into our workshop. We don't have a dedicated workshop or workspace anyplace. So we pretty much go to our client site. We set up. If we're lucky, we have a covered patio out back that we can set up shop at, and we go from there. So the kinds of things that I've invested in tool-wise are things that make it easy for 1 or 2 guys to handle and do the kinds of things at a client site that a cabinet maker can do in their, 50,000 square foot plant. So we've invested in tools and equipment that allow us to do that to a great degree. Maybe certainly not as efficiently as they can do it, but I'm not also paying for their overhead either.
Right.
That's the trade-off. Mm-hmm. So I've invested in things like, high-end track saws, a lot of stuff in dust extraction because, dust becomes a major problem on the job at a customer site. It's a huge problem that, you have to take pains to try to deal with that. So I've spent a lot of money there. I've spent a lot of money on finishing equipment. The right kinds of airless, paint sprayers and tips and guns. And, I spent a ton of money on Festool sanders, that can really do a fine job of sanding and extracting dust. We can go in and sand a kitchen cabinet and pick up 99% of the dust right there at the source, So all these little kinds of things are things that, are the places where I've spent a lot of money. A lot of the hand tools that we have are high-end stuff because, we're trying to deliver a high-end project, and sometimes it's hard to do that with low-end tools. That's not saying you can't do it. You certainly can, but it's a lot easier if you got the good stuff to do it,
Yeah.
So that's what Jason, to answer your question, we've been investing in that kind of stuff actually for the last couple of years, slowly but surely over time. There you go.
That's fantastic. I know that we talked a little bit before the podcast about this idea of sticking in your own lane. Can you talk a little bit about that to the viewers here, just kind of about choosing what you want to do or what you're good at and sticking with that? Can you talk a little bit about that and why it might be beneficial?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, one of the I think the downsides to a handyman business is that you get calls for, as I was telling you about, I had one of the guys that works for me from time to time is trying to kind of being sort of a part-time handyman guy. And he'll go from, one day he's doing yard cleanup for a client to the next day where he's fixing drywall or dry rot. So he's sort of like all over the place, and what he's doing. And I understand the motivation in doing it. Don't get me wrong. He's doing anything he can for the sake of just being able to generate a billable dollar. And as I say, I understand the necessity of doing that. But as I told him, I said, look, if you keep doing what you're doing the way you're doing it, all you're going to end up being is just a glorified laborer, which, by the way, is not necessarily a bad thing if you want to build a business around that kind of a model. But I don't see you wanting to do that. What I see where you have skills and where you're good at it, where you're good, is that's where you want to focus your time and your effort. Not only because, you can build up a really good clientele in those spaces, and you can work out your processes to such a point that you really become, you start making some money, you're making some good money, and you're not just all over the board hither and yon, so you're not having to, invest in a tile saw one day and a power washer the next day. That makes no sense. Are you a power washer or are you a tile setter? What are you? So find your lane. What is it you want to do? Focus in that area. And then do everything you can to do on the back end to build up your name and your company's name in that space. That's what you want to do. That's what I think. So that's kind of what we've been doing. We've kind of decided, well, this is the space that we want to occupy, and we're going to try to really focus on really getting good and profitable in this space. And then when we feel like we're in that, when we're doing well in that area, now we can maybe reach out and maybe expand that which we're going to do just a little bit at a time. Get good at that, build up a presence in that area, and then do it again with something else, but just slowly do it. Don't try to be all things to all people right off the chute. You can't do it.
Love it. I think that's so true. And I mean, for instance, like Malcolm, you're like maybe 20 minutes up the road from me. So I do not do custom carpentry. I don't build, I build things for function, not form. You know what I mean? And so whenever someone wants me to build something for form, I'm like, call Malcolm. Like, he's the guy. So I think it's very important to know what you want to do and also what you're good at, because I think more importantly than just the money is like providing a good quality product to your client is what's more important. So if you can't do something satisfactory, or if you can't do something with excellence, like, don't do it. Like, I hate custom carpentry. I hate painting. So Malcolm, you can do all of that.
Yeah. I listen, I'm with you. And, and I'm like, I'm not, there are a lot of guys like me, but there's a lot of guys who are not. And that is that even if I'm losing money at a project, I'm not going to walk away from it until I know it's done right and it looks good and it's a quality product.
Right. Integrity.
Yeah, integrity is a huge piece of that.
Yep.
And even though you might lose money at it, word on that gets out. I'll give you an example. I was just finished up doing this. This client had an office, or actually a small sitting room off the entryway of their house. And they wanted to do something in there. They wanted to do some shiplap, and they were concerned about the cost of it. And they wanted to demo out the existing fireplace facade. It was one of these old, ugly cast stone fireplace facades that you see a lot out there. They didn't like that anymore. And so they asked me what I could do. So I said, we can we can rip out this and I can build you a different hearth, something that looks more like it's supposed to be here, that has a correct scale and size to the room, because the previous one didn't have that. So, and they said, well, and so they showed me a picture. I showed us some pictures of similar projects I'd done. They say, I want that one just right like that. And it was the same, and this was, the hearth was being made out of wood where I custom made it. And the same thing with the mantle. I custom made the mantle. And when I stained it, it turned out terrible, absolutely terrible. I looked at it, I went, oh my God. And the client comes in and says, oh, I like it. I said, really? I said, I don't like it. But he was, he said, well, I think it looks good. I said, Tim, I said, forgive me, but I don't think it looks good. So I basically took, at my own expense, I spent the next day completely sanding all that wood until I got all the stain out of it. And I started all over again. And then the next time I did it, I got it the way I wanted it. I changed my process a little bit, so I got it the way I wanted it. But the point I'm trying to make is that I knew it wasn't right, and I wasn't going to let it stand, even though he liked it. And so I know that a lot of guys would say, oh, hey, you like it? Okay, great. I'm out of here. Boom, I'm gone. But I wasn't going to do that.
Right. That's awesome, man. I love it. And that's huge. I think integrity is huge in business, and word travels fast. Whether you want that word to be good or bad, it's going to travel, So wrapping up here, we got here about 10 minutes left. What would you say?
Is this of any value to you, by the way?
This is huge value.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the integrity piece, I mean, that's like a trait of any long-term successful business owner, whether you're a solo owner, operator, or scaling a company. Without integrity, you're not going to maintain, your clientele. You're not going to spread a good reviews and good word across town. So it's a trait that I think starts with the owner and leadership, and then trickles through to anyone that's working for you. Without it, you're just not going to succeed.
I'm going to use a word of profanity here. I hope you don't mind, just one time. And the way I would sum it up is simply this. Sometimes you just got to give a shit. That's the bottom line. You do. You have to care. Yeah. I have one client up in Cotavadero, where we did a whole bunch of custom carpentry for him. And right next door to him, they have a house. These are freaking expensive homes, I might add.
Those are big boys.
And right next door, there's this house where they did a great big landscaping job. And I don't know why, but they had to put some equipment in there, but they had a fracture in the fence and in the top rail across the top of the fence. And the way they fixed it was they went back in and they just took a 2-foot piece of 2x4 and nailed it on both sides of the break and walked away and left it. And that's been there for 2 years. And every time I go to their house, I look over there and say, have they not come back and fixed that yet?
Wow.
It looks terrible. It really does, but they didn't,
Wow. Interesting.
So, but that's an example where sometimes they just don't care. I'm done. I'm out of here. I'm going, And believe me, that will catch up to you actually pretty quickly. It'll catch up to you.
Yeah, definitely. And especially if you the leader and the owner, if you aren't showing care, then that's just the example you're setting for anyone you're training or on the job with you. And that just has a really nasty trickle effect that I'm sure we've all witnessed through, our like other companies servicing our homes or, any kind of service.
Yeah,
definitely.
Toxic.
So as we kind of wrap up here, we got about 10 minutes left. What would you say has been your biggest wins and your biggest losses in business, kind of in general?
Well, let me think here.
That's kind of a loaded question,
It's kind of hard to. So I would say that probably the biggest wins would be when you run across that spot in your lane, if you will, that turns out to be kind of profitable. And your biggest loss is exactly the same. When you run across that spot in the lane that you've chosen, that you're not doing so good. But not to give up. The key is that the fact that you're doing it means that there's a market for it. And what it just means is you've got to figure out how to do it better.
Mm-hmm.
That's a never ending cycle process, about process improvement, business process improvement, which is you have a cycle from start. What can we do to make it better so that the outcome is better at the end? And when you get to the end, you come right back to the beginning again and start all over again and say, how can we even be better yet? And that's just a never ending cycle of improvement, trying to get better at it. How, what are all the things, for example, just the process of bidding a job. I sat down one day and just started typing out just a list of all the different things that we not only our customers are asking us to make, but all the materials that are involved in that. And the thought was, okay, well, maybe what I can do is I can put a monetary value on every one of these items on this list. And then as I'm doing a bid and a quote for a client, I'll simply go through and eliminate the ones I don't need, and at the end of it, I'll be done with a itemized list of all the stuff I'm going to need and what I think that's going to cost. So that's actually something I'm working on right now, just to try to make that process faster and better and more accurate. Because when you're bidding custom jobs, it's hard to pin down labor and materials, estimated times, all those different things. It's just all the little stuff. Like, for example, how long does it take you to pack up all your tools and move them to a job site and set it up? How long does it take you to
clean them up? And then clean them up.
Clean them all up. Clean up the job site when you're done. How long does it, how much does it cost to buy tape, plastic, and paper to mask off a kitchen? Take a wild guess. What do you think that would cost, just by the way? I'm buying masking tape, a few rolls of plastic, some paper, just so I can mask off around the, cabinets and do all this kind of stuff, protect the floors. Take a wild guess.
I bet you could, depending on the size of the thing, you could probably have $50, $75 in that materials.
I wish I could get it for 50 to 70. That would
you're not buying it from the dollar store.
Yeah, evidently not. No, we probably spent
off-brand.
$350 just on
wow. Stuff. Holy cow. I wouldn't even have thought that. So
yeah.
Wow.
It's amazing how quickly it all adds up. Material costs, especially now with the prices going out of sight everywhere around you, is you got to really keep your finger on it.
I think that's where it comes down to is like, you have to know your numbers and everything. Like you have to sit, like people ask me all the time, like, what should I charge for this? What should I charge for that? How much should I be making per hour? But it's like, you have to literally take the time, sit down, write out all your expenses. And I love your idea of write out how much does a roll of tape cost? How much, blah, blah, blah. Like, figure out how much this stuff's going to cost you and how long it's going to take. And then you do the equations and figure out what you need to charge appropriately,
I would tell you, I would tell you that the devil's in the details. And when I say that, there are all the little tiny hidden costs that if you're not accounting for them, they can really cost you dearly. That's why, for example, and on a kitchen job in particular, man, there's a lot of them. There are just a lot of little things that you have to account for. And it's like $10 here, $15 there, $20 here, 30, 40, 50, and it adds up in a hurry,
Yeah.
So at the end of each job, one of the things I do is I keep every receipt that I receive and everything I get to complete a job that goes in the file. And at the end, I add up all these numbers and I take a look at what I estimated versus what I actually spent to see how I'm doing on that, to try to make adjustments, and that can be a real eye opener. I'm telling you, that's an eye opener doing that.
That's huge.
It takes time though to invest in that, but you'd be giving yourself a pay raise in the short, medium, and long term. On this topic, we talk about the book Profit First is a really good read to kind of put into perspective, like these little small exercises to look at your profitability and your income, your expenses. Because if you just take the time to look at all that and make a plan and start making improvements, you don't need to hire more people and get more jobs to make more money. You can make more from what you've already got. You just got to look at it closer.
Yep. Definitely.
No, it's interesting you say that and that's one of the, going back to what I said earlier about, like, for example, I was, looking at having, some of these 1099 guys bid the job to me so I can, because when you look at some of these projects from start to finish and all the moving parts involved in one, you can become completely overwhelmed by all the detail. So by eliminating maybe 50% of it, taking that off your plate, it allows you to focus on the other half and really try to understand what's going on, where you're doing things right, where you're doing things wrong, So And I'll give you just a brief example of that. So, for example, one of the things would many times happen. In fact, it happened probably on every single job we did, which is at least one cabinet we would get the door sizes wrong. So they would come in, we would go to put them up and go, oh well, hell, these weren't going to fit. This is not right. So then you got a delay of about 10 days from the time you replace an order for the replacements till they come in. Then you got to go through the whole cycle of painting, prepping, all that stuff. So I looked at it and said, well, how can I avoid making that kind of a mistake? And the answer was fairly simple, which was, typically if we're doing a cabinet replacement, we're replacing everything, they're usually a 1/2-inch overlay cabinet door, which means it has the face frame. The cabinet doors, when they close, they overlap the opening by a 1/2 inch, both top and bottom, left to right, up and down. One of the ways that the simple way to eliminate of just making a tape measure error when you're measuring the doors is to also measure the openings. So if you know what the opening size is, you can cross-reference your door size to the opening size and see right away if you've made a mistake, or if you've written it down wrong or something, and you can catch it before it becomes a problem. So it was just a simple procedural change that we made that really helped a lot. Really helped a lot.
That's good. So what would be some parting advice that you would have for the new guy looking to get started in the handyman industry, or maybe even transition into more of a trim carpentry, niche? What would be your parting advice for that guy?
I would say the first thing I would do is try to get a sense of, what is I'm good at? What is it that I enjoy doing? What is it? What does my lane look like? What is it? What is my lane? That's number one. And then you need to have a plan, which, and the old saying goes is that, if you don't, what is it? If failure to plan is planning to fail.
Right.
So, get yourself a plan. You're in your lane. Now, what am I going to do to grow that business in that lane? And that brings up the other thing, marketing. I think that, that handyman marketing booklet you guys put together is really a great source of information on what to do. I think it's well written. Anybody who is starting up in business, you can read that in 15 minutes. You can figure out, okay, I need to go do this. In terms of where to put your advertising money and how to spend it. Where to do it, where not to do it. And I think that's another thing. So you need to be able, as quickly as you can, develop your web presence, and it has to be a good web presence. I think that is crucial. I mean, it's not like the old days where you put an ad in the yellow pages and people will be searching through for God knows what, and they're going to, give you a call. Those days are long gone. So having a great web presence is, I think, absolutely critical. And then understand your processes and your costs. You got to understand, this is what it costs me to do a job like this. This is how much I think I can charge my customer, and then go about doing it. And then the last piece of advice I would give you, especially if you're doing projects, is don't do the project on your money. Do it on their money. So when we go in, I charge no deposits on an estimate. Or, if someone says, okay, we want you to do the job, I say, great. I said, yeah, I don't want any money right now. I'm not going to take any until the day we start. The day we start, they write me a check for 50% of the project right then and there. So if it's a $25,000 project, they're going to give me $12,500 right there on the spot. And then we have a progress payment schedule that we use from that point through the close. And typically, if it's going to be a 2-week project, or a 3-week project, I'll do a 40% deposit and then a 30-30. So 40, 30, and 30. Do every Friday. And the whole idea about that is that they're upfronting the money for the project to you. So they're actually almost acting as if they're like the banker if you have a line of credit, And then at the very end of the project, it's a very small amount due at the end.
Man, that's huge. Malcolm, you are a wealth of knowledge. It was a pleasure having you here on this episode of the Handyman Success Podcast. Thank you so much for being here. viewers out there, or listeners, we've got a few things that we want to recommend. We have a Handyman Success Mastermind group on Facebook. Malcolm is going to get plugged into that, so he's going to be on that Facebook group. So if you have any questions at all for Malcolm, you can leave them in the comment section of this video or get connected with him on the Handyman Success Mastermind group on Facebook. Great people. Everyone that's been on our podcast is in that group. So there's a wealth of knowledge there. Also, check out the Handyman Journey Facebook group on Handyman Journey Mastermind group on Facebook. Another place where there's a whole great wealth of knowledge. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you guys are listening on YouTube, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to this channel. Anywhere else, leave us a comment, send us an email at handymanjourney@gmail.com. There's a few different emails, a few different ways to reach us, but just send out a smoke signal. We'll hear you.
We're here to help.
Yeah, if you need any help at all, give Jason a call. This guy does fantastic websites at handymanmarketingpros.com. Reach out to me at handymanjourney.com. We would absolutely love to help you with your business. And Malcolm, thank you so much for being on this podcast. We appreciate you.
Guys. My pleasure.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone. We'll see you on the